The value of hyper-personalization is being able to use that information to make predictions about the future. It's about trying to figure out what is going to happen next, not just what has happened in the past.
So Jazz, here we are in New York, the sun is shining, great to get this opportunity to catch up with you and talk to you. We're talking today about hyper-personalization. It sounds a bit of a buzzword actually, but in reality what it means to me is the ability to make ultra-precise decisioning in near real time using sort of automated tools like AI and machine learning, looking at a vast data pool all around maybe the customer behavior, customer experience, so what a customer's been doing. I think maybe to give an analogy around that, it would be where we've been until recently is around in sort of personalization, which means that if I was to go and say buy a coat last month and I was to go back online today, maybe I would start to see ads around a coat. So in terms of hyper-personalization, the ad, instead of just being about a coat, could be the color, or it could be the right size, or the right style, or even the right payment methods or time of day, would be all tuned to me as an individual customer. So that's the difference. And obviously we see that as well today in the world of fraud and financial crime. So maybe you can just talk me through how you see hyper-personalization impacting the world of fraud and financial crime.
Yeah, really, I mean, it's impacted us in the same way that most things do, is that criminals have better tools now. We used to get messages that were generic. If you bank with this bank, click on this link. It had spelling mistakes in it. It often wasn't translated well. And so it was easier to spot and not respond. And now what we're seeing, primarily driven through mass compromises, there's so much information out there on every single one of us that, they know the kinds of passwords they used, our logins, where we shop, our behaviors, where we potentially bank. And so you're getting very personalized scam messages that are hard to differentiate from real messages, where the bank is sometimes impersonated or the police are being impersonated. And now it's gone to the next level with things like deepfakes, where they can actually make it sound like your grandchild is on the phone, asking for help from a prison. Make it sound like your CFO is requiring, to wire money for a new contract or payment. And so the level of hyper-personalization has really made it harder for people to spot scams and to really differentiate legitimate conversations from deepfakes and, attempts to defraud.
Yeah, so I think what we're saying is those attack techniques could be getting better, but I suppose it sounds simple, straightforward and logical, but I think when you look at it and try and break it down into the steps, there's a lot of complexity and a lot of things that need to happen in order to achieve that, both for good and for bad. So I think obviously it starts with understanding the customer a lot better. So that's obviously the data. What are some of the challenges you see, and how do people go about making sure they've got the right data to start with? Because if you don't, then you're not going to make the right decision.
In the past, a lot of that behavioral monitoring was to identify whether it was really you. Is it really Robert who's signing into this online banking payment? Now, that same level of information should be used to look for changes in your normal behavior. You normally come in, pay your bills, navigate through your credit card, and then move money. But if all of a sudden you're logged in at an unusual hour from an unusual place and rapidly trying to move money, even though it's really you, you may be under the influence of a scam or a criminal. And so understanding that behavior, what does normal look like, and what is abnormal, not just is it Robert or not, but is this unusual behavior for Robert?
Yeah.
That can significantly help in the identification of things like scams or authorized payments. And so hyper-personalization works in both ways. It can be used as a force for evil by criminals, and it can be used as a force for good, by fraud fighters who are trying to protect customers from these types of attacks.
It's a big, brave new world out there. There's a lot of new data. It must be quite daunting. Some of our banks that we speak to say, how do we look at this data? How do we understand what is relevant for any given scenario? How do we decide whether to look back 1 week, 1 month, 1 year in determining what normal looks like?
It is a new norm. I mean, in the past, transaction data was all people looked at. This is how you transact. This is where you transact. This is how often you go on vacation. And that was effective in the past. But in this era of hyper-personalization, you really need to understand more than the transaction. How often are you interacting with the website? How often do you call the call center? What is your normal behavior when you go into a branch? So getting what I would call interaction data, whether that's from the digital channel, the call center, or other data, can improve your probability of identifying something before the bad transaction happens, before the event that causes you financial loss. And so, there is this opportunity here to take advantage of all of the data that's available and make better decisions. And more importantly, move earlier in the kill chain. So you're not waiting for that high risk transaction, and you can actually prevent fraud as opposed to just detecting it when it occurs.
It's not just about taking all this data and processing it, because if you took too much, you just wouldn't be able to make those decisions. It's also understanding which is the right data to use at any particular scenario to give the customer, as you say, the best advice and move into that prevention.
And it's not just the right data, it's being able to use that data in real time. It's not good enough for me to know yesterday, your behavior on the website is, unusual. I need to know while you're on the website, while you're transacting. So it's about knowing what is predictive and what's right data, but also having that data available in a platform that allows you to make decisions on it. It is information to allow a decision as opposed to information for the future. And so having the data is important. Having that data in real time as it occurs is even more important. And then picking what is predictive and what is not predictive will allow you to ensure you're not wasting a lot of time collecting data that doesn't meet the goal of either preventing fraud or detecting fraud. And that is very important and something that, comes with experience and time.
Time and built up, and obviously understanding from previous scenarios or what else is happening out there in the global payments network, what sort of things are indicative of scams, and capturing actually maybe some of those fraud outcomes. And the more you can collect, obviously, the richer you can make it and the more selective.
That's exactly it. I mean, people always talk about new fraud trends and new fraud threats, and there are always new threats. But a lot of the times those new threats are just migratory. It's already happened in the UK. It's happened in Australia. And now that faster payments is launched in the US, the same things were happening here. So there's definitely learnings in terms of what data is predictive, what variables are predictive, what is the MO that criminals are using. And so there's advantages in learning from different regions and different areas, but collecting that information in aggregate form and being able to use that information in new markets areas can make sure that you're, getting ahead of what we call the hockey stick growth on fraud. When something new starts, it seems to ramp up really quickly. The quicker you can react to it, the faster you can stop that ramp up. And so it kind of has a deterrent effect. Criminals, we've talked about using the path of least resistance. Sometimes that path of least resistance is a channel that you haven't protected, or a line of business that has less security. In other cases, it could be, the next financial institution that is not as well protected. And, in consortium situations, it could be the next country that is launching a new solution. And so this idea of being better than your peers is even more important than previously, because once criminals think you're weak, that deterrent effect's not there, and they continue to attack you even after you've put controls in place.
Yeah, and as we all know, criminals can attack in just one place, but obviously institutions have to defend everywhere. And that makes that challenge extra hard. That's why you need to have this much clearer view of your customers' behavior and understand what is right. I understand that. And being able to collect not just a single bank's view of the world, because obviously they can't see what else is going on around them, but being able to capture and share that intelligence between their peers and different institutions. Ultimately, what we're doing here is protecting consumers. But I guess there's other benefits as well from doing this type of analysis, being able to process this large amounts of data in real time, and make the right decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the ultimate goal is definitely to protect consumers, help them not lose their money. But as you make better decisions, you reduce your false positives. So, in trying to stop scams, you often will stop people from transacting. And having the right data at the right time in the right place can help you ensure you reduce those false positives and only add friction where necessary. And so, it will eventually help with fraud loss reduction, but can also be a powerful revenue driver.
Right.
Consumers that have a lower friction, when they're applying for a new product or service, or when they're transacting, are most likely to remain sticky, remain loyal, and continue to use your products and services. And so there's definitely two sides of this. There's protecting the consumers, but also protecting your brand and protecting your customers from, bad experiences.
Do you think it will also be used in other areas, like maybe helping merchants? How can, say, for an acquirer, use this type of processing to assist their merchants and make a safer environment for all customers to shop?
Especially with e-commerce merchants, where sometimes the goods are delivered right away, They're usually liable for those transactions. They're in a position where, they want to deliver a service with the lowest amount of friction, but they also want to protect themselves from chargebacks and losses. And so, again, there's an opportunity to take the data, the information that's there, and try and understand how close is this to known fraud patterns. And if it is, it's highly likely that it is fraud. But even more important, is this normal behavior for the customer, the merchant? And, have we seen this occur in other jurisdictions or other places? And so aggregating information, personalizing that information so that you understand this is normal behavior for Robert. He always buys electronics, and it's usually on Friday night, when he gets paid and he's browsing, through his social media. Whereas it may be unusual for you to gamble. And so if you all of a sudden sign up for a gambling website and start to make bets, and that's not in your character or behavior, you can quickly identify that as a fraud. So hyper-personalization, is necessary. It's part of the world we live in. And it is important to take advantage of all the data that is available to institutions.
Yeah, and I guess in the past, institutions have considered probably their own data, but as we say, that can now broaden, because being able to be selective on the right data to make the right decision is obviously going to make this processing over a long period of time possible. And also opens up the opportunity, I think, maybe to take in other sources of data to feed that decision. Things like a simple name, maybe name address check, telephone number, is this address that the delivery is going to, as you mentioned in the case of a purchase scam, is it going to somewhere where we've seen known fraud before? Maybe for your institution, they wouldn't have seen that, but maybe somebody else in that community has seen that issue there and can feed into that aggregated, you say, pooled intelligence.
And this idea of not just using your own data is pervasive. Everybody wants to be able to use consortium data, learnings from others. And so we're starting to see deployment of solutions at networks and at switches. So working with MasterCard, for example, we can see data across a number of different institutions and regions and get to that level of understanding, that is more aggregated beyond just a single institution. And I think this works well in fraud because it's a non-competitive industry. Sharing intelligence and sharing information for fraud has been something institutions have been doing forever at a transaction level, and now they have an opportunity to do this at an interaction level, a device level. And so, yes, I think there's an opportunity to take advantage of your data, but more importantly, share data and take advantage of consortium solutions to, for the betterment of everybody that's playing in that ecosystem.
Yeah, and I think, as we know, when we go out and so we talk to the banks, financial institutions, we can see that although yes, the fraud and the threats from both fraud and money laundering is severe, that there is still hope, because obviously, as a financial institution, being able to see all this data now that they probably couldn't have done 5 years ago means that they can get a really, really clear understanding of their customer that maybe even the criminals wouldn't be able to see because they haven't had that past experience. And so I think there are opportunities and chances for the financial institutions to finally be able to understand what the real data is, what is relevant, as you say, to make the right decisions, and actually arm their consumers much better than the consumers could do themselves. So although it's important to warn, the financial institutions have got a significant role to play because they can see that much bigger ecosystem.
Yeah, and some will say this is not a new trend. People have been creating data lakes and large warehouses full of information. And I think what we've realized is that the information has to be there at the right time to make the right decision. It's not good enough to aggregate everything in an offline data environment that you can't use. It is important to be able to use that information in the right time, at the right moment. So, for example, providing customer training and awareness. You can randomly provide awareness on Fraud Awareness Month and let people look at that. Or you can give them what I would call just-in-time training. If a large amount of funds have been moved from your investment account into your spending account, now may be the best time to teach you about investment fraud and the types of things that are happening out there with cryptocurrency and investment scams, as opposed to randomly. If your grandkids are on vacation, can you now provide them with information about kidnap and other types of scams where they'll try and target you? So leveraging information not just for fraud detection, but also for prevention, training awareness, and other information can significantly improve how valuable and how well received that information is in terms of preventing something from happening.
So actually, with the right technology, then there is a lot of promise to actually be able to overcome this challenge that we face. Provided you have capturing the right data, you understand which is the right data to use and which ones are not helpful in making decisions. And obviously having the right machine learning and AI and automated processes behind it. I think that is the way forward.
The advantage with machine learning and automation is that you can make those decisions quickly and just in time. You're not waiting for an individual to, look at the information, investigate it, and make a decision. That decision is automated based on the information that's coming in. You'll still need investigators to, complete that investigation, have the conversation with the individual, but it's about making the decision in the right space at the right time and being able to use that information to proactively prevent fraud.
In summary, I guess that we would say hyper-personalization sounds like a buzzword, but actually it's a really beneficial approach and something that can be realized today for the good of consumers, for the good of financial institutions.
Absolutely. It is not a buzzword. It is not just a marketing ploy to sell people more information. It can be used, again, by criminals to improve their scams, but by financial institutions to thwart those kinds of compromises as well. So, it's available for people to use. And again, it will be a differentiator in the future. I think people will find that when they're getting hyper-personalized service, they're more willing to continue to use those products. They're more loyal to the individuals that provide those capabilities. And in the end, they'll have more trust in the financial institution and the channel and network to be able to transact.
Yeah, absolutely. So although obviously there's a lot of talk around, in terms of marketing and advertising and promoting retail sales, for example, there's lots of applications for this. And obviously we're right at the heart of that in fraud and financial crime prevention.
I think it all boils down to trust and security, and, having more information about the individual can make them feel more catered to and can increase that trust. And overall, I think that's our final goal.
Yeah, absolutely. Building that trust.